falls under the theme of digital inclusion, digital literacy, and diversity. For the panel discussion titled Internet for All, Strengthening Literacy, Inclusion and Diversity, we have Ms. Amrita Chaudhary, who is the Director of CCAOI, President of Internet Society Delhi Chapter, Vice Chair of the Asia Pacific Internet Governance Forum, heads the Asia Pacific Women's Special Interest Group of Internet Society, and is currently the Nominating Committee 2021 member at ICANN, the Internet Cooperation for Assigned Names and Numbers. She is an active participant in tech policy discussions, both at domestic and international platforms. She is also involved in capacity building, outreach, and research in Internet governance. She is one of the founding members of the India School of Internet Governance, curates for the Geneva Internet Platform. Besides, she advises Youth IGF India, Rural SIG, the Rural Special Interest Group of Internet Society, Afghanistan IGF, and SIG, etc. So thank you so much, Ms. Amrita, for joining today as the moderator for the panel discussion. And personally, you have been of wonderful support and motivated the Youth IGF team since the day one of our, since the day one of IGF. Thank you so much, ma'am. Over to you.
Thanks, Ihita, and pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. As in, you've been hearing a lot of insightful discussions through the day. In fact, from the last presentations, I learned a lot. And welcome to this session, Internet for All, speaking about strengthening literacy, inclusion, and diversity. So most of us know that the internet has actually dramatized our entire world. In fact, we cannot think of imagining a life without internet today. And the COVID situation has further reiterated the importance of a secure, open, robust internet infrastructure, which can be accessed by everyone. When everything is in shutdown mode, be it schools, offices, etc., it was telecommunication and the internet which became our lifeline. While most of us here have benefited from internet, however, there is less than half of the world who are yet to be connected. Governments across the world, including India, is actually aspiring to ensure everyone is connected. The digital divide between these connected and, however, if you look at it, the digital divide between people who are connected and unconnected is increasing, especially between genders, marginalized communities, and between developed and developing nations. So UNESCO states that, if there are 87% people connected in developed nation, there are only 47 people connected in developing nations and 19% only in least developed countries. So this is how skewed the internet connectivity is. As I mentioned, the pandemic has highlighted the deep effects of this digital divide, because people who had internet could access, could empower themselves. However, those who did not, they are being left behind much more. That also led the UN Secretary General cautioning that the digital divide is a matter of life and death amidst the COVID-19 crisis. Now, why is internet needed for everyone? People may think that, I have it, but why should someone else not have it? Recent reports from the Global Economic Prospect of 2020, the World Bank, indicates that, the globe is going through a crisis, and those countries that lack digital connectivity most will be left behind and be hit more by this current recession. Also, this lack of connectivity in countries is enhancing the barriers between developed nations and developing nations in terms of opportunities, in terms of economies, in terms of most of the facilities which can help to bridge the gap. While various reasons are cited for this growing digital divide and the exclusion of people from the internet, such as access or connectivity, availability, affordability, lack of digital skills, socio-cultural issues, relevance of content, issues of language, because most of internet is English, and even trust over the internet. In fact, recently the Alliance for Affordable Internet published a report which indicates that billions of people are denied meaningful access to the internet due to high cost of mobile handsets. Citing the example of India, they mentioned that while our country has the lowest internet data cost, however, the price of the cheapest smartphone from Jio constitutes about 206% of the average monthly income of many people. So if the costs even of the cheapest smartphone is so much, how would people connect? And in fact, all the e-government services and other services are going online. So how does people who are not economically empowered get these? So today we'll try to have an interactive discussion with our panelists. While there is a lot to be done, there are steps being taken to make internet available, inclusive, and trusted for all. And the panelists here today, in their own way, are working to ensure that internet is more inclusive and they can connect more people, make it more safe, and make it more neutral. So, I would like to start by first asking PR Lakshmi Eshwari, who is the Joint Director at CDAC Hyderabad. She's been involved with CDAC for a long time. And, Lakshmi, can you share a brief with everyone on some of the initiatives which CDAC has been taken to build digital literacy in the country, especially since there is a growing trend of education and all aspects of our life going online. I'll try to be a hard time master, and I would like to request all our panelists to make their initial interventions by within 4 minutes. Lakshmi, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Amrita and Nihita. Very good morning to all the fellow panel members and participants. So I'm Lakshmi and I'm part of CDAC Hyderabad. So just let me tell briefly about CDAC, Center for Development of Advanced Computing, or CDAC is a scientific society under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. So it's basically an R&D organization. We are located across India and our headquarters is at Pune. If you look at it, CDAC works in various R&D domains like high performance computing, grid and cloud computing, multilingual and heritage computing, professional electronics, VLSI and embedded system, software technologies, including free and open source software, cyber security and cyber forensics, health informatics, and another important thing is education and training. So CDAC does R&D and come out with innovative solutions which are of the societal relevance. And if you look at it, we have different verticals, but across all the verticals, like we are trying to target on education and training. So this is something which is to the heart of CDAC, along with the research and development and the solution development. Okay. So here I would like to focus on different aspects, actually, how we can, CDAC is contributing towards this particular digital inclusion and all. If you analyze, actually, like one important thing is the cyber security is the most important thing when we talk about the digital, the inclusion, when we talk about the way we are trying to utilize the internet. We are very clear that it is boundaryless and anyone from any part of the world can easily access. So, and with the evolution of the new technologies, so there is a lot of convenience to the end user, but at the same time, there is always the threat which is growing. So considering these kind of aspects, cyber security awareness generation is taken as one of the important initiatives. So with the support of our parent ministry, that is the Ministry of Electronics and IT. So we are coordinating one national level cyber security awareness program. So we call it, and if you want to have more details, you can look at infosecawareness.in. In the chat window, I'll try to type the URLs of these kind of the sites and all. Our target is actually to generate the awareness to the different stakeholders of the society. It can be students, it can be parents, it can be teachers, IT professionals, non-IT professionals, government officers. So considering all the different stakeholders, we have come out with a different awareness material in the form of presentations, posters, brochures, newsletters, all kind of lot of animation material and other things like that. So now, see, if you look at it, like the minimum thing which is required, anyone trying to access is what kind of the browser security has to be enforced, mobile security, Wi-Fi security, how endpoint security has to be taken care, kind of thing. So now, considering all these aspects, we have come out a lot of awareness material, And as a single organization, though we are across India at 12 different locations, we may not be able to promote the considering the different locations. So what we have done is we have participating institutes across India. We have IIITs, NITs, and NILIT organizations, and so many organizations, around 70 plus organizations are supporting us, who are trying to promote this information security awareness across the India. So even if you want to take it up this particular activity, you can visit our site infosecawareness.in, and you can always like involve in one is as a user, other thing is you can use the material and take the promote to the other people. So here we one is actually like if you look at it, general awareness material required for the students when they're trying to access the online classes or when they use the PC, mobile and internet, and what kind of care parents have to take care and teachers. In addition to that, what we have done is we have introduced the retrofitting of some of the cybersecurity courses as part of BTech curriculum. Okay, so we have the committee represented from panel from different the premier academic institutes like IISc, IITs, NITs, and all who have designed this particular curriculum, and we have introduced them as modules in the BTech curriculum. In addition to that, we also designed some of the MTech specialized courses in cybersecurity. So similarly, for the government officers and other things like that who are managing their networks and other things like that, we have designed some specialized courses which helps them to address the various threats which the organizations normally face, and they're trying to kind of the defense mechanisms they have to adopt. So like that for the different the stakeholders of the society, so we have done it, and this is one of the important initiative. I feel like in this particular era, the InfoSec awareness is the very thing, and each one of us are responsible towards the following the cyber ethics and cyber hygiene and promoting this particular thing. So also like CDAC being a premier R&D institute, so we carry out some kind of advanced education and training programs. See, most of the time what happens is like in the engineering colleges and in our colleges, so we may not focus much on the practicals, like because of the various reasons actually, whatever it is. So the students may not get enough time in spending in the labs and other things like that. So what we have done is we have designed some specialized courses. So it's something like 5 to 6 months courses where we give emphasis on foundations, at the same time advanced content in a specialized domain. Like if I talk about an embedded system design course, where they will try to understand the basics like the data structures, system level programming language, operating systems, and computer architecture. Along with that, they also try to understand IoT hardware design, microcontrollers, embedded operating systems. So these are the advanced things. That's how we packaged some courses, and these are very much in demand in the industry. So like that, we have different verticals, like we have diploma in advanced computing, VLSI design, GUI informatics, system software development, who want to pursue more in terms of the low level programming and who are very keen doing some writing device drivers and other things like that. Also in something in advanced secure software development, because
I think we are 4 minutes away from your schedule.
Yes, madam, I am just closing it. So like this, we have the different courses which are helpful for product development, because as young engineers, you need to have skills required to do that. And also we keep offering the various these things which are required for industrial skilling programs also from online, because after the COVID, we thought that, okay, these are very important. Recently also we started something in IoT hardware design and multilingual and cross-platform mobile application development, blockchain application development, like that. So I will just leave the URLs and other things in the chat window so that you can get more idea about these kind of initiatives, and you can also contribute as part of these particular activities of CDAC.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi ji, and sorry to have interrupted, but we have a tight schedule and they have something else. But it's very important when internet is losing the trust, building the cyber hygiene, educating people at different levels is very important. Next, I would move to Mr. R.K. Singh. Mr. R.K. Singh is the Director of Planning on the board of Bharat Broadband Nigam Limited, which is also known as BBNL. He's a Indian telecommunication services with over 3 decades of experience in the telecom sector. Mr. Singh, how is BBNL planning to connect the balance 60% people in India who are unconnected? And I also have a follow-up question to you, as in, what do you think needs to be done by the community at large to connect people?
Thank you, Amrita. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, thank you, Amrita. I am RK Singh, Director, BBNL. Actually, it is Bharat Broadband Network Limited. This is a special purpose vehicle under Ministry of Communication, Department of Telecommunication. This has been created to bridge the digital divide between the rural and the urban India. You see, around 2/3 of population, that is 65.5% of our population, lives in the rural areas where there is hardly any connectivity. Whatever we are talking about, say, I'm having all the figures. If we talk about the internet connections, and mostly all these internet connections, we are talking about only the wireless. Now, government plans to take the optical fiber cable right up to the villages. Presently, it is right up to the Gram Panchayat. There are 2.55 lakh Gram Panchayats all across the country. So BBNL is actively involved with a lot of stakeholders, be it the state government, be it other CPSUs, for taking the optical fiber right up to the Gram Panchayat. Now, recently, Honorable Prime Minister has declared that all the villages, that is nearly 6 lakhs villages across the country, will also be taken on this BharatNet. The project is BharatNet. This will be taken right up to the villages also, so that around 66.6% of population also gets the benefit of this internet connectivity, internet cum broadband connectivity. Presently, even though as far as the TRAI recommendations, 512 kbps and above is treated as broadband, whereas less than that, it is in normal, it is narrow band. So there, most of the connections, which presently 98% of the customers are having wireless connectivity, but government plans to take through optical fiber network in some of the remotest part. Either we are it is going through the satellite connectivity also. So these all are a scheme of things which government has undertaken through BBNL. So I am actively involved with all the state governments, all the other CPSUs and other ministries also. So, but there are a whole lot of challenges involved in this, because even though these broadband, this is a kind of an infrastructure project, as if you are making a road right up to the villages. But until unless the vehicle starts flying on these roads, this will be of no use. So until unless there is a utilization of this particular network, the network has to be utilized by all the stakeholders, be it the villagers. So the content is one of the biggest, so that most of the state governments, we are trying to involve so that this particular infrastructure, which is being taken right up to the Gram Panchayat and subsequently up to the villages, they start using. BBNL has recently started with giving of fiber to the home connections also in the villages. Five FTTH connections are being provided in the villages, which is to either to the primary schools, primary health centers, to the police stations, so that whatever the customer-centric services which are there in the urban part, that also reaches to the rural part. So presently, this net, we have connected 1.5 lakh Gram Panchayat already on the optical fiber network, and nearly 2,500 on the VSAT connectivity, that is the satellite connectivity in the remotest part, maybe in the northeast of India, Jammu Kashmir, Leh, Ladakh, these, and some remote part of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. So these are connected on the satellite, where laying of optical fiber is not feasible at present. But that optical fiber will also be taken, because this satellite connectivity is having a limitation with the vis-a-vis the bandwidth. So if more number of customers come there, so then there could be a problem. And you all know, as far as the International Telecommunication Union report, an increase on 10% of the fixed broadband, because BBNL is in the process of setting up the fixed broadband. Any 10% increase in fixed broadband will yield net gain of 1.9% in GDP of the country. So that is a huge work which has been undertaken by Government of India. Recently, Prime Minister has indicated that this activity has to be completed in 1000 days. So this announcement was made on 15th of August this year. So we do have a window of 3 years for connecting all these Gram Panchayat as well as villages. But there is a serious challenge about the utilization of the network, for which the state government and the various local content players, we are in talk with the MSOs also, that is the local cable operators, they can utilize this particular optical fiber network so that the cable TV or all these education related activities on sample basis, we have started in few of the schools, but it has to penetrate much deeper.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. I think you have raised a very important point, that we may have the pipes, but how the pipes are used is important. And that is where stakeholders need to work together towards the common goal, that is of, connecting everyone. So now I move to the youngest member panelist, who technically is a youth, and we are not youth in this panel. And her name is Varini Gupta from Voices of Women in Solidarity, which is called VOWS. Though she's the youngest here, she's doing some amazing work in promoting safety and gender equality online. Varini, since you're the youngest, I would give you 6 minutes. Rest of the others have 4 minutes each, and I would like you to to share what you have been doing to raise awareness of issues related to youth, women, keeping them safe online, making the internet more inclusive, and why do you feel it is important to do such initiatives?
Thank you. So before I start speaking about what I do and who I am, I'm going to talk about what's happening in this world. So goal number 5 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals says promoting gender equality. According to the UN, 1 in 3 women have experienced sexual violence or physical violence of some sort. And 750 million women out of that have been married before their 18th birthday. The UN has also revealed that in the year of 2017, 87,000 women were killed intentionally, out of which 58% women were killed by their intimate partners or family. That means 137 women killed per day by family. What is this world that we're living in? The NCRB, the National Crime Records Bureau in India, revealed that there's 1 rape in India every 15 minutes. So I want you to imagine how many rape cases a year. So that's 4 rape cases an hour into 24 hours a day into 365 days. So that is 35,100 rape cases a year in India. So what I want to say is that the patriarchy has dominated our society. On the internet, we have 700 million users in India and 3.4 billion users all over the world. So that means the ratio of men to women on the internet is 3:1. Women here have been subject to toxic masculinity, internalized misogyny, and violence. And this has had an elbowing and chilling effect on women's speech and self-expression. So after all this, then came COVID. There's a lot of uncertainty surrounding COVID. Our lives went online. School went online, our work went online. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. While we thought that we would be safe at home, less rape cases, less abuse, this whole new era of online harassment came into existence, the boys' locker room incident. The boys' locker room incident hit as a big fat reminder to us about how a chat room of 20 boys passed wild comments on women's bodies, circulating obscene images, messages, and objectifying women. And when they were asked why and held accountable for their actions, the only response they ever gave was maybe she might have asked for it, or basically they said victim blaming in a sentence. So I'm Varini Gupta. I'm a 17-year-old representative of the emerging youth of today, and I present WOWS to you, a platform we designed to disseminate atrocities against women. Voices of Women in Solidarity is an Instagram platform, also known as wows.sg, which promotes gender equality and aims to build a safety net around survivors. It's for victims of sexual assault, where we help find survivors their authentic voice again in an atmosphere of intimate solidarity. We highlight the great work done by participants and these women, and we help get their voices to light. We increase awareness by focusing on disseminating information, mostly in South Asia. WOWS is a joint initiative between my partner Cheti Maheshwari, who is also on this call, and I, and we ultimately aim to help women rewrite their stories. Let me rephrase that. This initiative is not just for women, but also every community, every man, every member of the LGBTQ+, every person who needs a chance to voice their opinions and their stories, because sexual abuse is not just a problem for women, but a problem with society as a whole. We're a point-to-resource platform where we focus on society as a whole, and what we do is we point survivors to resources and help, like doctors and psychologists. However, living in India, I realized that therapy is expensive and groups most vulnerable to abuse may not be able to afford these therapies. What we do is then our Instagram provides professionally verified by doctors and psychologists. We provide information free of cost all over the internet for aiding these communities and all individuals on their path to self-discovery and their journey to strength. Thanks to the internet, it has given us a huge exposure. We've connected to like hundreds of people. We have about 20,000 people on our reach, and we have people reaching out. And we believe that it's a great opportunity amid COVID to connect people to safety and like work in intimate solidarity. As an individual, I have also worked with organizations all around the world. I've worked with the Raja Academy in Kenya, where we work towards girl-child education for abuse survivors and women who've gone through genital mutilation. And I have also worked for shedding light on sex trafficking in Vietnam, and will continue to spread awareness about such topics. So what I want to talk about is that WOWS as a platform stands to educate and empower. Thank you.
Thank you, Varini. Now I move on to our next panelist, who is Ritambara Mehta. She's the co-founder of Nazariya, a queer feminist resource group. Ritambara, I would like you to share what your organization is doing to make the internet more inclusive and safe for women and non-binary communities.
Right. Thank you, Amrita, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. I'll take on from, so I won't spend a lot of time on what my organization is doing to make it inclusive, but I believe one of the issues that we constantly face is what is the problem? Why do we need to provide internet to people who are coming from marginalized backgrounds? I'll switch off my video and then maybe switch it on a little later. So as Amrita pointed out, I work with a queer feminist resource group. We primarily work with LGBT people across age groups. And so for a lot of us, people with diverse gender identities, sexual orientation, sexual behavior, we did not find solace through our parents, schools, or the communities around us. We found solace and acceptance we lacked on the internet. Now, discovering my sexuality in the early 2000s meant having no representation in newspapers, on cable television, in magazines. I didn't see anybody who felt like me, had desires like me. And that motivated me to turn to internet. I looked for advice and encouragement, which was mostly a judgment-free zone. And of course, when I say all of these things, I speak with a certain class and social background. For somebody who had access to internet in early 2000s. I'm not going to get into how bad internet is. There's a lot of noise around it. Our parents do a good job at it. But for us, like regulating internet is important. For us, that creativity is important. But for groups like us that work on LGBT issues or that work on issues of gender and sexuality, it's important to amplify representation. And this is where my organization also comes in. That representation which is fair, and it works towards providing accurate information. Pardon the joke, but we all do not always want Akshay Kumar to be representing our issues all the time. We want to be behind those tables. We want to be editing those films. We want to be directing those films. We want to be acting in those films, or any other form of media or any other form of art that we come across. And sort of making now a slight segue into generally people with, so of course I spoke a little bit about people with diverse gender identities and sexual orientation, but just think about youth that is defying gender norms, that is defying sexuality norms in terms of, say for example, loving a person of a different class, loving a person of a different caste, religion, region, and generally discovering who I am, how do I make sense of the whole world, and more of us. And I'm not, I would like to disagree with Amrita. I am much closer to Varini in age. So I'm technically not a youth, but I am a young person. So a lot of us are seeking that information on our health, sexuality, how to live our life online. And online for us, especially for a community like us and for people who do not fit into these gender and sexuality norms, internet is a credible way to access information privately. So not only we need to make that information accurate, but we need to keep it private as well. So this is one of the things I really want to talk about, that of course LGBT people access internet to discover their own lives, to make sense of who they are. But for a lot of young people who are defying social norms, internet is a great space as well. And for example, Varini also spoke about the boys' locker room, right? So issues of consent, issues of gender norms, expression, sexuality, and all of these things become really important. I'd like to end with like a tiny bit of a data. So according to data from NFHS Round 4 survey, for women, the peak age for first sexual encounter is at the age of 15 to 19. It's a large-scale, nationally representative survey. And it also says that education delays this. So your first sexual encounter. Of course, one of the primary reasons is that women tend to marry a little early, but providing information, reliable and accurate information, would mean we are able to have the freedom to make our own choices, to make our own decisions. And this education needs to be, this information, this representation needs to be inclusive and accessible. Early on, when the proceedings of the day started, Raj spoke about in his presentation on GIS mapping, he spoke about accessible parks, that there are so many parks in Bangalore, but most of them happen to be in central Bangalore. I use the same analogy that there's a lot of information and space for youth online, but we need to make it more diverse, inclusive, and accessible. I would like to end my presentation here. I'll be posting a few links, taking my cue from Lakshmi. I'll be posting a few links that people can use to get reliable and accurate information. And I also post coordinates of my organization. We provide free counseling services to LGBT people. So in case if you ever wish to speak to somebody and you want somebody to hear you out, we'll be more than happy to speak to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ritambara. And I'm sorry, I got you into the other bracket. That was not the intention, but
there was no way for you to know.
So, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So how are we on time? We have time till 12, so we have about 20 minutes. So I'll reverse the thing a bit. There were 2-3 questions, and Ihita and the organizing team, can you ping me about 10 minutes before we have time, so that we can kind of fast situation. Mr. Singh, there were 2 questions for you. One was, making the cables available is one part of the problem, but the other problem is for the rural or the underprivileged to afford the internet, which currently is in the hands of private organizations. This was one question. The other was from Dr. Govind, who says, what is the present time frame of BBNL for reaching to 6 lakhs villages?
As I have already indicated, that recently Honorable Prime Minister has given us a target of 1,000 days, which is roughly 3 years, to connect all these 6 lakh villages. Out of that, 1.5 lakh we have already reached, and balance has to be reached in next maybe nearly 3 years. So BBNL is all geared up to adhere to this target given by Honorable Prime Minister, and a lot of work is already the approvals, and so that is in pipeline, because some cabinet approvals are required for, because previously we were only limited up to the Gram Panchayats, but now we are going up to the villages. So there is the addition of nearly 3.5 lakh villages from 2.5 lakh. So for that, funds and all that is being worked out, but the timeline is 3 years. So we stick to it. And as far as your affordability, so BBNL as a part of, in 1.5 lakh Gram Panchayat where we have already connected, we are giving one free Wi-Fi. So anybody can, in the village, anybody can use it. So that is free. And then 5 FTTH connections. So that will be in the government institutions. Mostly it will be a primary school, primary health center, Anganwadi center, or wherever, a post office. So these all government functions can run smoothly. And that will be for the community at large. Presently, because this entire motto of BBNL is bridging the digital divide. Normally, whatever we are talking about, sitting in either the metros or the major cities. So we do not understand how the internet connectivity is there in the rural areas. It is actually very, very, I can share some figures with you. The internet density.
Mr. Singh, we have 3 more questions.
Yeah.
Would you be able to it into the chat, because, or you can give the links from where the the secretariat can share it with the entire team. I think they are preparing those things.
Okay.
So if you can share the statistics on the chat here or the link, it would be great.
I'll have to. Okay.
I'll share I will ask Ihita to connect with you, and she will be sharing it.
I'll share with Ihita.
Sure, sir. Thank you. I'll do that.
Yeah.
Right. So we have another 2 questions. One is for Lakshmiji. What are the few tips to manage the infodemic, that is fake news, etc., that is part and parcel of internet in general, that has taken place in the last few years? So I will go to you first. Ritambara, there's another question for you. What is the biggest challenge or threat to the LGBTQI community? What they face in the internet, and what is the biggest problem for the community to have access to the internet? So Lakshmiji, over to you first.
Yeah. So definitely fake news is something is very, very challenging in the present scenario. So what I feel is basically if you are very clear with the source of information, if you look for authentic or trusted sources, and if you are breaking the chain at some point of time, then definitely we can make sure that you are coming out, because otherwise it's not an easy task. Actually, a lot of ML based solutions and other things, the R&D efforts are happening to detect whether it's a fake news and other things like that. So what I feel is basically we need to look at the sources of information, and even what kind of mobile numbers from which you are receiving, from what the URLs and other things. That's the most important thing. And always we need to make a responsible role in the entire chain, so that if you're again contributing to that, it's a never-ending thing. So we need to follow the cyber hygiene and also the source of inputs. Otherwise, actually, as a technology, it's not an easy task to detect and remove that kind of thing. So we need to look for some kind of ML based and other research efforts are happening actually. Various organizations are looking at it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Lakshmi ji, as in it is not only technology, it has to be worked at the community levels to, fact checkers need to work. There has to be, more digital literacy, more empathy on how to use social media, etc. Ritambara, I come to you with this question. There is also another question since we have less time. This is directed to Varini and you, that when we talk about online violence that women and marginalized communities online face, why are we so reluctant to talk about the platform's responsibility to ensure online safety? Intermediary liability is something we do talk about, but the conversation needs to be much more stronger. To give some context, on a lot of organized troll attacks by troll accounts on Twitter, many people have been doxxed. When reported, platforms such as Twitter tend to say, this is publicly available information. What are we doing to address the roles of platforms?
Yeah.
So you have a first question, Ritambara, then if you could also add.
So Ajay, what are the biggest challenges? First of all, I would talk about privacy. So for example, during the pandemic, and somebody else also spoke, Varini in fact spoke about it, that during pandemic, one of the biggest issues, so we run a counseling unit, and one of the biggest issues that a lot of LGBT people pointed out was that now they're not being able to access internet privately. So earlier they could go to their university's cafe, or they could access information or LGBT friendly content over their phone. But now, because there's constant surveillance at their home, they are unable to access information. So first thing is absolutely having access to that information, and then privacy is another thing. Now the second thing that I'm going to talk about ties with Purnama's question as well. So for example, the kind of bullying that LGBT people face in real life, in IRL, is more or less the same that the kind of bullying that people would face online as well. So for example, pick up any service. Internet is a service, governance is a service, for instance, courts are a service. When all of these services are so heterosexual in nature, how do we expect them to be diverse? How do we expect them to be inclusive? For example, when we are building parks, we have a certain notion of who's going to access this park. We never think of how people in the suburbs are going to access those parks. Similarly, when we are creating content online, we only have a particular target audience in mind. And then how is Twitter or how is Facebook or how is any other platform different from how the general population is, for example? So it's absolutely important to hold them accountable, but at the same time, it's about a lot of conducting these trainings, having these discussions to sensitize people. For example, we often end up working with, and I'm going to end here, we often end up working with the police. Now, police is also extremely patriarchal. Only when you start these conversations that, of course, parents are also violent to their children, or for example, violence can also happen in a same-sex relationship, or the fact that same-sex relationships exist. So you need to have these conversations, otherwise only straight normative people are going to occupy these spaces. So that's my take on these two things. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think everyone needs education. Even the law enforcement need education, that there are different people, non-binary people, there are issues. What the society depicts, that happens in all places, and there is a need to improve that. So Varini, I come to you quickly. There are two questions. The first one was platform responsibility against violence against women and marginalized community. And the other is, what are the steps your organization would take with cases like the Payal Tadvi case that happened last year, which broke the internet, woman versus woman issue?
Okay, so I'll answer it in two parts. First part about the internet responsibility. So for these social media platforms, we understand, yes, there is a loophole. What started happening is when people as we said, that there have been pseudonyms that have been created, there's impersonation. So when these cases were also reported online for harassment, these social media giants actually never took those accounts down, because the algorithm only picks up malicious activity if there's explicit evidence for such activity, which is highly unfair. The algorithm does not pick up pseudonyms because there are these catfish fake accounts that had been created for harassment purposes. So again, when it comes to internet responsibility, I feel social platforms, they're giants like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, they need to have like stricter policies regarding catching pseudonyms and like finding people like fake accounts and stuff, because there's this whole idea, if you heard about Snapchat, I think I brought it up in the conference yesterday, Snapchat being an encrypted app. When you send a snap, it cannot be recovered. So when in many cases that we've heard, when snaps were sent, when harassing snaps were sent, or obscene images or texts were sent, they were never recovered. And upon reporting, as the government said, that once it's on the internet, it's on the internet. It could not have gone away. So we believe that as a platform, we're obviously working towards educating and practicing cybersecurity and safety, but as social media giants, we're expecting them to rework their policies and find alternatives for data downloads. So that's something that's being looked at.
I would have to cut you short here because we have 5 more minutes technically, but I have requested people out from the organizing committee to give me 5 more minutes. I would, platforms do have a responsibility. They're trying their best at this time. They need to do more. However, if you look at anonymity, it is required because there are nation states wherein even posting something against the government, if you put it, you may not be able to do so. And that's why anonymization on the internet is part of it. There are challenges, but how to deal with it is something which needs to be looked at. But I would go to all the panelists, 2 minutes. How do you think this issue can be addressed, and what is the role youth can play in making the internet more inclusive and safe for all? I'll start with Lakshmiji, then Mr. Singh, Varani, and Ritambara. 2 minutes, not more.
Yeah. So what I do is I'll try to talk from 2 perspectives. One, youth as a user. Another thing is youth as a contributor towards the security of the cyber space and all. So as a user, one most important thing is actually we need to follow the ethics and the cyber hygiene. That's very important thing. And most of the people who want to be the software developers and other things like that. So they have to focus more in terms of trying to design the vulnerable free software so that in future we don't end up in these kind of hacks and other things like that. So our role writing a secure code is very important, and also the secure way of trying to access and also promote the things. That's very important thing. In addition to that, actually, if you look at it as a country, internet, definitely during the pandemic, we have seen that. So earlier we used to think that it is only kind of supplementing kind of things, but now, so we had to do everything through the internet. So overnight, we have to move to the Zoom platform or WebEx or some platform like that. So if you analyze carefully, we are trying to adopt some other solutions where some other countries have designed or something like that. So now considering our socio-cultural aspects and linguistic aspects, so to give the best learning experience to our people, what kind of solutions, learning platforms we can try to build. That is very, very important thing. And in addition to that, we were thinking, okay, Zoom platform, there were some issues like a kind of thing. So what kind of security measures we can try to build where students that can be limited to that some kind of sandbox where he can have the best feel of it, but maybe he'll not be able to do some kind of the other unethical kind of things like that. So we need to look at our problems and try to think about the most important solutions. Another important thing is the monitoring the learner remotely. So that is continuous monitoring of the learner, because in the classroom we are able to do it, whereas here it is not possible. And another thing is that how do we assess the learning experience? So the performance monitoring, all these aspects actually we need to think about the solutions considering our socio-cultural aspects. So I think it's a big challenge, and definitely when we have these kind of things, so it is going to help the country and the society.
Right. Thank you so much. Lakshmiji, you pointed it rightly that India needs certain India-centric solutions, just like internet, where mobile, what happened in the world didn't happen in our country in the way. We had to have Indian solutions. Mr. Singh, what would you think is the role of youth in trying to make internet more inclusive? You are muted, Mr. Singh.
During pandemic, we have seen the usage of internet and this Zoom kind of meeting activities taking place so heavily. But as far as in our country is concerned, we need to have some cyber security. Of course, CDAC, Madam Lakshmi has already indicated. As far as BBNL and Department of Telecom is concerned, we are more into making the infrastructure ready so that people are able to access from the from have-nots to the haves. But as far as the usage is concerned, we need to have some kind of a discipline. And for that cyber security, there are LSAs, even under the Department of Telecommunication, they are monitoring all these. But we need to have more cyber security laws so that these kind of, whatever the misuse of the internet is concerned, it is a very powerful tool, but it has to be used in a very disciplined fashion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singh. Varini, we'd like to go to you. 2 minutes.
Yeah, got it. So first I would say that as a generation, because I'm part of the emerging generation of today, and we believe that education is key. We believe in, although corrective measures work, we believe in preventive measures. So instilling like sex education, cybersecurity from a young age. We believe that instilling these in younger kids, say from 13 onwards, that's when you hit puberty and your mind actually starts thinking and going in directions. So that really helps streamline thoughts. Another quick thing I want to touch base is, yesterday at the conference, I heard something, this comment made in a cybersecurity, about cybersecurity in the same context, about how a woman uploaded a picture in a bikini and it got photoshopped, and somebody said that it was trouble because why did she upload it in the first place? I just want to quickly address that, because this is the 21st century. You are 25% over with this century, and I don't think we can progress further without clearing this. Your clothes do not equal consent. The length of your skirt does not determine how much you're worth. And this is something we need to have a robust education system where we're actually teaching boys. We don't need to teach our daughters to protect themselves from boys. We need to teach our sons to not sexualize women and not treat them as objects, no matter what the woman is wearing. And I feel that we need to have more talks on consent. So that is exactly what we're doing at WOWS as well. We focus on confidence boosting. So I think this is also a response for Ms. Aishwarya Singh, her question for internalized misogyny. It's unfortunate that it happens, but that's also because of low self-esteem that we feel other women are a threat. But at WOWS, we're working towards improving that. What we do is that we boost confidence. We do stimulating activities. We're working on redefining sex education, where we're teaching students, human beings, more from how their anatomy looks like, more from the anatomy, shifting focus towards more emotional, deeper connect, because till we don't understand what's inside here and inside us and others, we can't understand what goes on in their body. So first respecting our bodies and ourselves, and then respecting other bodies. And I think that
Varini, it's very important that consent is something which is important, as in just because you are not an object, there has to be consent for everything. Ritambar, I move to you, 2 minutes.
I'll be very quick. I don't have a lot to share, but like for us to demand the representation or to demand accurate information is equally important as the right to, of course, I'm equating two different things, but the right to vote, for example, or the right to education, or right to marry whoever we want, like right to accurate and reliable information is a right. And unless we don't demand it, unless we don't pressurize our universities or our government at large, then how do we how do we otherwise express that this is what we need? So demanding for it continuously is very important. Holding a university accountable, holding a school accountable, holding a government responsible, accountable to provide you with reliable and accurate information is what I think we need to continue and do that.
Right. Thank you so much. And we'll, thank you all the panelists. You brought in very important points. I'm sorry, there were quite a few questions. The chat was overflowing with comments and questions. We couldn't take all of them. My apologies, because we had paucity of time. To conclude, I would say that if we want to build a better forward, we need to ensure that there is adequate innovation, there are digital solutions to connect people, more India-centric approach, because what works somewhere may not, to ensure stable broadband connectivity, which is fast, reliable, affordable, meaningful. Everyone should have the equal opportunity to use the internet as a public good, regardless of their socioeconomic status, gender, beliefs, and financial status. There has to be different approaches taken. People should stand up for their rights. You need to demand, as Ritambara was saying, that if certain things are not given, you need to do. There has to be some amount of capacity building, not only of digital skills, safety, online, but also of how to treat other respectfully. That's what the Human Rights Commission talks, that everyone is equal, be it man, female, or non-binary people. We need to have those respect, just like we need to have respect in the offline world, we need to have similar respect in the online world too. If we want to make internet available for everyone, inclusive, everyone has to work. It cannot happen that just one team or one department works. Everyone has a role to play, and there has to be an open environment to learn from each other, the best practices, and work on it. Thank you so much. I hand it over to Ihita. Sorry that we shot by 4 extra minutes.
That's no problem, Amrita. And thank you very much for moderating this particularly very interesting and very critical topic of digital inclusion, digital literacy, and diversity. And regarding the questions, we are taking note of them, and we will be sharing it with the speakers via email, and then posting the solutions and the answers that you give on our website soon. So there's no concern. So we will be getting back to the questions. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank all our panelists, Rajesh sir, Lakshmi ma'am, Ms. Ritambara, and Ms. Varini Gupta for joining us today, for sharing your perspectives, interacting with the youth, and also motivating us further. And Mr. Rajesh Singh, we're sorry about the mistake, and we have incorporated the change. And I think now we can maybe proceed with our next session. And I would just like to make an announcement. Priyanka, if you could change the slide. Right. So we actually have quite a long break now, and we will all meet at 15:10 hours. A session on mental health and internet begins at 15:15 hours. So we'd really like if you could join us 5 minutes in advance. So when the speaker arrives, we're all here on time. And you may leave the call right now and join us back at 15:10. And thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much, Amrita, for the session today.
Thank you, and apologies, panelists. I had to cut you short at times. My apologies.
Thank you, Amrita. Thank you, Ita.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will all see you at 15:10 hours. Please don't be late.